So last week's discussion we did on verse 10 and 11. A little recap of what we studied in verse number 10 and 11. So in verse 10, Swamiji takes up one very interesting and important idea, which is coming from the voice of the Guru. So it's Guru Vacha. And that is to refer to ignorance in this philosophical sense. And this is a very critical part of any scriptural study, is to differentiate between what is referred to as ignorance or lack of jnana. So the word jnana in entire Vedanta is English translation would be knowledge. But the knowledge in the philosophical sense is subtly or very distinctly different from what we would call as knowledge in the worldly sense. The knowledge in the worldly sense does not refer to the subject. It assumes the subject and looks at only the object. And in the philosophical sense, there is no need for the object. So the ignorance in philosophical sense is ignorance of the self or the subject. And knowledge in the philosophical sense is knowledge of the subject or the self. So any great teacher, particularly of the scriptural teaching, will definitely make it a point to emphasize this part, that ignorance, which we refer to as ignorance in English, should not be relatable or should not be related to what we call as ignorance in the worldly sense. All of ignorance in the worldly sense is knowledge which is already out there in the objective sense and about which we are not aware of. So when we are saying that I don't know something in the worldly sense, we can soon come to be in that domain where we can say we know it. But in the philosophical sense, it is not that simple, because the subject is always the aspect which is ignored in the normal experience of an individual. And because of this ignored aspect of the self, which is called self-knowledge, what then happens? The experience is of sorrow and suffering. And not only is it of sorrow and suffering, it is of continuity. That means in the mind, there is always this understanding that there is something that is continuous, and the aspect that is continuous actually does not belong to the world. It belongs to my relation to what is already part of the world. So very often we don't give it that much attention. But suppose you say, I have suffered in the past and I am suffering now, and I am likely to suffer later in the future. This idea of suffering, we have established it as if it belongs to the world. It can be information, suffering because of information. It can be actual, absolute, real suffering, which we have experienced. We tend to relate it and we say it is in the world. But strictly speaking, it is not neither in the world nor is it with us. It is in the understanding of continuity. We have established a thought process which says there is continuity. And in that continuity, we are not investigating what is the source of continuity. We are just projecting out into the world a sense of continuity, and we are content with that. So all this idea that we have surrounding past, present and future is essentially this. It is only a process in thought. It has nothing more, no more relevance than being a process in thought. Because we have postulated it, we believe it, we trust it, and we hold on to it. Otherwise, the only effective reality, if you want to look at it as self-knowledge, does not require continuity. It is self-knowledge is essentially instantaneous spontaneity. It is all the time spontaneous. That is how self-knowledge is. And that is why there is this question that we have tackled in verse number 10, is what is the experience? Why is it that sorrow and suffering is the experience of the ignorant, but not that of a self-realized person? For the self-realized person, the engagement in the world doesn't arise in the absence of self-knowledge. It arises in the presence of self-knowledge. So when we say it arises in the presence, the self-realized person is not engaging with the world through a filter. And that filter is ignorance filter. For the non-self-realized person or person established in self-knowledge, there is no self-knowledge, and the exchange with the world is through the filter. And what is this filter? The filter of attachments, the filter of aversions, the filter of likes, dislikes, filter of different types of emotions, different types of thoughts, different types of preconceived notions, etc. So through those filters we engage with the world, and therefore there is no possibility of any other condition other than sorrow and suffering. Even though there appears to be pleasure, there appears to be happiness, it is only momentary, and because it is momentary, it is never sustained by itself. It is always sustained only by thought. So if you examine and you ask yourself, very often we do that in small reflective sessions and things like that. Think of the happiest moment, etc. So we often can reflect on it, but we are not happy because we are reflected on it. We can narrate it. We can just cite it as an example. We can cite it as a story, but we don't feel the way we might have felt when we have actually gone back to that moment or condition. The reason is this narrative and this recall that we are doing it without self-knowledge. Had we had the self-knowledge, the spontaneity and the perfection of the condition in which we are is so immaculate that there is no possibility that anything of the nature of sorrow and suffering will have any lingering presence. So pain in the moment, pleasure in the moment, happiness in the moment, sometimes suffering in the moment might arise, but it will not have any lasting or lingering effect. It just vanishes instantaneously. Just the other day I was reading a small passage by a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who was in very, very acute upper respiratory tract kind of disease, including asthma, and he was possibly in the last phase of his life, somewhere close to 85, 90 years of age. So he was citing to his disciple, last night I could not sleep and I had to prop myself up with a lot of cushions and pillows because I was feeling a sense of choking and things like that. So finally, when I had propped myself up, for a moment it occurred to me, why am I doing all this for such a useless thing as the physical body? And the moment this thought occurred to me, I went into meditation, and thereafter everything changed. No more anything of the body could cause any kind of problem. When you read such portions and you understand, the stature of the person who is making this comment, you know that this self-knowledge is such a powerful subjective condition that nothing of the physical frame can ever even touch remotely the condition of self-knowledge. And that is what is the real meaning of saying, what is the condition for the self-realized person. Similarly, when we try to understand what is true dispassion and what is fake, there is this psychological statement or assertive or affirmative dispassion that can arise. And that psychological affirmative thought dispassion that can arise is essentially a fake dispassion. It is a very forced condition. That means I can say I have given up this. And when I say I have given up this, I can revel in the fact that I make this statement that I have given up this. Like many people make a lot of New Year's resolutions and things like that, in which some things are given up and some things are taken upon. But what is the meaning of fake dispassion is, it will sustain itself only based upon this psychological pressure or psychological acceptance and the amount of effort one puts into that psychological condition. And what is true dispassion? True dispassion is that which arises, which is effortless. So when you have true dispassion and it is effortless, that is based upon what is called as genuine and complete acceptance that what you are letting go is worthless. The only example that many teachers have cited as the closest to understanding what is true dispassion is the condition of the mind when it is about to rest for the day. So one might have the most chaotic of days, one might have had the most difficult of times, one might have been riddled with the worst of calamities and the most difficult crisis. But when one is ready for resting, one has absolutely no attachment to that crisis, no attachment to the calamity, no attachment to the condition in which we were prior to resting. All you know is you can let go. Why this comparison is given is because this letting go occurs not because we love rest. It occurs actually from the fundamental acceptance that there is some extraordinary recovery capacity in rest. And that recovery capacity entices the condition of the individual willing to let go. And this willing to let go becomes very natural. You don't have to have some dialectical discussion as to why are we letting go of the crisis. We don't have to do that. We just can let go and we can just get into rest. So philosophically, many teachers have cited that this is the meaning of saying letting go with true dispassion. And when we let go with true dispassion in every other worldly endeavor, that is the condition that will engage or encourage us to get established in pure knowledge or true self-understanding, self-knowledge. And the example of the rope and the snake and the 3 points that Swamiji makes as fear, fearlessness and beyond fear is essentially to bring home this point. Fear and fearlessness are basically states of mind which is prompted by the thinking process. Beyond fear is not a state of the mind. It is actually beyond the mind. So the mind is not necessary, and the fear and fearlessness, which is actually part of the mind, are actually insignificant. They don't matter when you go beyond fear. So the state of beyond fear is that which sees the oneness in the rope and oneness in the snake and is not confused by either. Neither confused by the condition of the rope nor bound by the condition of the snake. There is no effect of the snake that is going to be lasting and troublesome, and there is no effect of the rope which is going to be very distinctly different from the condition of the snake. So that is what we mean by fear, fearlessness and beyond fear. And of course the last one is the state of the enlightened one as brought out in Bhajagovindam. So we recognize that the two conditions that are referred to is the condition of being engaged in complete dispassionate living, which is called yoga, or complete passionate engagement, which is called bhoga. So the realized one, when they are engaged either in complete dispassion or total engagement, the condition is the same. Similarly, either the realized one is completely alone, isolated in some lonely cave, or amidst people in the midst of maybe a whole throng of people or a mob of people, and engaging with them, talking to them, chit-chatting, the condition of the inner state of such a person, such a self-realized one, is the same. So that's the remaining unaffected by the vicissitudes of life. So that is the message that Shankaracharya gives us about the state of the self-realized one. In verse number 11, it is shown that duality does not cause any suffering, and The reason why duality will not cause any suffering is because the mind which feeds the idea of duality is completely absent in the self-realized one, and the mind itself has got absorbed back into the truth, into the real knowledge or the real self, the condition of the self. And then it is also mentioned in that the world becomes a source of great entertainment. And why is it so? The experience of the world requires the mind. But the state of the self-realized one is not the state of the mind. Whereas today, for me, because I am not self-realized, I'm not been established in self-knowledge, my condition, what I experience, is the condition of my mind. If my mind is balanced and steady, I experience steadiness and I experience calmness. If my mind is disturbed and vacillating, I experience unsteadiness and I experience the disturbance. But for the self-realized one, the mind is only an instrument to look on the world for what the world is. And the example that comes closest, most of the Mahatmas, great teachers, have brought us this example. They said that when you pay a price and go to watch a horror movie, you are not going there to get horrified. You are going there for entertainment. So anyone will say, why should you pay money and go for a horror movie? You say, no, it's just fantastic. I tell you, unless you do it, you will never enjoy it. You will never know what it is. And you will hear me waxing about this idea of watching a horror movie. Anyone who hasn't done it will say, how can there ever be entertainment? But the one who is prepared can enjoy it. It's the entertainment. The same holds true for life and its tragedies. Anyone can say, why should one enter life at all in the first place, if it is full of tragedy? It is not full of tragedy. It is full of entertainment, provided we are established in self-knowledge. So that is the bit that is coming out in verse number 11. Okay. So if any questions, we'll deal with that now. Okay. Verse number 12. The teacher concludes his teaching with the following